Welcome to Point Blank. This is your host, Panama Crypto. Today our guests are Sasha Milik and Heikki Vantinen, both co-founders of API3. Welcome, Sasha and Heikki. It's good to have you on Point Blank.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. So let's kick it off. So who is part of the core team and backgrounds of API3?
I'll let Heikki answer this just because he's been involved in the project longer since the beginning.
Yeah, so the core team is basically composed of our previous company, CLC Group, and some additional individuals like Sasha, for example. So CLC Group is 12 people. I used to be the CEO there, and Burak, our technical genius with API3, used to be the CTO, and Sasha just joined us for API3. So that's basically the core team, I suppose.
So getting to business here, what is API3?
Yeah, so API3 is a project for the creation of decentralized APIs. Decentralized APIs are basically on-chain data feeds that are composed of multiple first-party oracles. And what first-party oracles are basically Oracle nodes that are operated by the data providers themselves. So the API provider operates the Oracle node, and that then feeds data all the way directly to the smart contract that is used for the aggregation of that data into a single value that can then be used to execute the smart contract, for example, in DeFi or insurance or whatever use case you want to build.
Do you guys have already set the mission and vision for API3?
Yeah, well, that's basically the mission is to build a lot of these the APIs, so decentralized APIs that can be used by smart contract developers, basically irregardless of their data needs. So whether it be financial data for DeFi applications or weather data for weather insurance or data from a logistics API for some sort of supply chain application, it doesn't really matter. Essentially what we want to do is just create a connection between any API and a smart contract, whether it's in a direct or aggregated form, and that thus like basically enable a lot of these real world connected smart contract applications.
Do you guys currently have any partnership?
Yeah, like we have partnerships in terms of like service providers and also data consumers. So from the service provider side, for example, we're working with Claros for the dispute resolution functionality of our insurance pool. We're working with DORG for creating the DAO structure. So we're building on Aragon on the DAO side. Then for like enterprise blockchain as a service integrations, we're working with CurveGrid, and they're very useful for that. And then for sort of governance and building of the project, Curve Labs is a partner, so they're sort of like a founding level organizational partner that we're working with. And then on the consumer side, we're working with Prime DAO as like this initial integration partner for these early data feeds. So we can integrate a lot of different, mainly financial the APIs or the APIs that are financial in nature. So crypto price data feeds, for example, to Prime DAO's DeFi projects or products. And then obviously our investors as well. So they provide us with a lot of very valuable insight and also business development connections towards all different types of decentralized applications that are being developed and might potentially need external data.
So what makes API3 unique, better than ChainLink, and why will it thrive?
I don't want to like hawk up all the questions, so I think I want to let Sasha get some words in as well.
So I think our structure is different in many ways, but the two, I guess, main things I'll focus on is having first-party oracles as our focus instead of third-party oracles, and also having a decentralized governance. I would say those are the two, what I would see as the two main differences. I don't know if Heikki would add anything to that.
Yeah. So like basically, the difference between first-party oracles and third-party oracles is that basically with first-party oracles, the data provider runs the node. So instead of this structure where you have the Oracle contract on the blockchain, which is then connected to these Oracle nodes that are operated by these like third-party teams, and those third-party teams then using that Oracle node call this API that's off-chain, and then that data gets relayed through the node onto the aggregation contract, or basically the Oracle contract. You have the structure where essentially you just have the Oracle contract on chain that calls the API more or less directly, because the Oracle node and the API are being operated by the same entity. So that's basically the main difference between these third-party structures such as ChainLink and some others, and API3. So that's like a main differentiation, I suppose.
Yeah, and for example, with price feeds, which are currently like the most commonly used data feeds on the blockchain, you'll see with ChainLink price feeds, they'll have multiple nodes delivering data from the exact same source. So for example, I think they have like 2 or 3 nodes in their ETH USD price feed that come from CoinMarketCap. So this doesn't actually add any kind of decentralization. You have 3 nodes delivering information from the same source. So like I said, it doesn't add any kind of decentralization. All it does is increase costs and increase security risk, as opposed to, getting that data directly from the source. Yeah,
basically the only thing that you're improving with adding nodes in between the factual data source and the Oracle contract on chain is you're making it less likely that Oracle layer will then attack itself. So basically do a collusion or a Sybil attack. And so like obviously when you have more nodes in the Oracle, like decentralized Oracle network that exists between the data source and the smart contract, it becomes less likely that there will be a collusion attack or a Sybil attack. But at the same time, it also really decreases the efficiency of that whole structure, and also it creates this sort of opaque layer in between the data source and the Oracle contract, where essentially you're sort of treating these Oracle nodes as the source of the data, which is sort of factually incorrect, because all of these nodes get their data from the source level, which is the API layer. So when you treat an Oracle system as being decentralized because it has a certain number of nodes, what you should really be looking at, like how many data sources is that data coming from to those nodes. And to the extent that you're seeing the current solutions, a lot of them sort of treat or have the argument that a data feed is decentralized because it has 20 nodes, or because it has some level of decentralization at that node layer. But really what you have, or where you have the decentralization bottleneck, is at the API level, because these 20 or 20 something nodes are being delivered their data from like, let's say 8 to 10 APIs. So you'd be better off just having those 10 APIs running their own Oracle nodes, because you'd have the same level of decentralization, but you'd have a much more efficient framework and a structure, because you'd only be paying gas fees for accessing 10 data sources instead of 20.
Yeah, I think the Sybil attack thing is really big, because that's such a big problem with Oracle networks. It's pretty trivial in most of these Oracle networks to falsify your identity and pretend to be 4 or 5 different node operators. But if you have a first party Oracle, that's a company. Companies can collude, but the likelihood of that happening, a Sybil attack happening when you have first party oracles, is minimized significantly with this kind of a structure. And another thing, so I said I shortened my argument to how our system is different to 2 points: first party oracles and decentralized governance. So a lot can be said about the importance of decentralized governance for decentralization in general. But one thing I really like about it for constructing data feeds is that data feed construction is, I don't want to say outsourced, but the entire DAO is part of that. And it becomes, the construction of data feed becomes entirely open. So we know where the data sources are coming from. The risk analysis is completely open. It's in the form of a proposal. You have aggregation, where people in the DAO that have a statistical background have a say in that. So when a data feed is constructed, it's constructed in a completely open manner. It's not opaque, where you don't know where nodes are getting their data from. The aggregation is selected by you don't even know who in this centralized governance. Like having having data feeds constructed openly like this, I think is a huge advantage.
Maybe to just as a final thing to add, and this sort of goes into what you're specialized in, Sasha, but you're actually able to do much more eloquent aggregation when you know where the data is actually originating from, and when you can use source level providers such as Exchange APIs. So essentially you're not limited to just basically taking the median at the aggregation process. You need to sort of remember that the actual data, the Oracle nodes that sort of form this Oracle network in between the API and the smart contract, they don't actually do any data treatment or sort of achieve any sort of consensus. That's achieved at the aggregation contract. And right now, the way that that's achieved is by taking the median. Now, like that's a very sort of rudimentary way of doing data treatment and aggregation, and you can actually arrive at much more eloquent ways of doing that if you just know where the data is actually coming from and you're using first-party sources.
Yeah, so I don't want to get into really boring statistical things, but I'll give a specific example of where this is important. If you don't know, you have 20 nodes that are third-party nodes that are getting their data, and you don't know where from. It becomes extremely likely that the data is going to be skewed towards one source. So, for example, if 4 oracles get it from CMC and 2 get it from some other source, when you just do source blind aggregation, you're going to skew your data towards one source. If you just take an average of all these third-party oracles, the average is going to be skewed towards the source that most of them get it from. But this is actually like something I ran into when I was analyzing price data feeds before I even got into API3. It was clear that multiple nodes were getting their data from the same source, and I was like, well, you can't just blindly average all that information together. You have to weight it appropriately. And I don't think a lot of these important statistical discussions are happening with data feeds, even though it's called a data feed. Like you should have a lot of statistical experts weighing in on how these data feeds are constructed. So, and that's one thing we're focusing with the DAO. We already have people that have a background in data science and statistics, but we're really focusing on getting more of these kinds of people involved.
This episode is brought to you by PrimeXBT, the exchange that makes possible to trade with leverage on legacy markets from a single Bitcoin-based account. That's amazing. So how will Airnodes simplify the usage of oracles and APIs?
It basically enables the data provider to run the Oracle node. And the reason that it enables or it makes it very easy for the data provider to do so is that it's very simply an API gateway, a serverless function that they can deploy in a set and forget fashion for free. So it doesn't cost them anything, and it just provides this very simple interface for smart contracts to call an API without any middleman. And so, like I said, it's a serverless function. You can deploy it on your existing cloud platform where you basically host your all API functions already. So for example, if that's AWS, then you can deploy the Airnode as a Lambda function. And once you've deployed it, it essentially requires no operations from your API team. So you don't need a smart contract developer to operate the node. It's not something that you need to manage on a day-to-day basis. You just basically deploy it, and it runs on its own as an API gateway that can be called by any whitelisted smart contract.
And another thing that's really important with these serverless functions is that you only pay for how often it's actually used. So, if you're actually running your own Oracle node, you'd be paying for like constant uptime. Whereas if it's some serverless function, you only pay for how much it's actually used. So that's already more appealing to new node operators or new API providers that want to operate a node, an Oracle.
Yeah, so it basically enables them to just set up this node and just have it running as a part of the existing API stack on whatever cloud platform they're using. And then once the demand arises on the Web3 market, they have everything on the sort of the infrastructural side that's required for them to tap to that demand with their API.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to get into this, Heiki, about the kind of chicken and egg problem that you guys were trying to solve with CLCG and how Airnode addresses that, because it becomes sort of costless to provide data even before usage exists.
Yeah, like I guess we can discuss that. So yeah, there's definitely a chicken and egg problem, which basically states that you need some demand on the smart contract platform before it makes sense for a data provider to really do anything towards meeting that demand with their data. And for the most part, with the Oracle problem, or basically the API connectivity problem, it states that you need some sort of middleware to connect an API to that existing demand. And then if the middleware is something that you need to hire a person to run, you need to assign that as a task to someone within your organization. That's obviously an opportunity cost in the sense that that person could be doing something else. So it doesn't really make sense to extend any resources towards making data available for smart contract developers before there's existing demand on the blockchain for your data. And that then, it doesn't really make sense to build decentralized applications that rely on some sort of external data that isn't available. So that's why you don't see a lot of decentralized application developers building application for data that isn't available through some sort of existing Oracle, and it becomes this like Sasha said, just like a chicken and egg problem.
I was reading in the white paper today that it's not the third parties, the first parties that do manage the Airnodes do not need to subsidize any gas, and the end users are the one that need to afford for the gas up front. I think that's a neat feature because it would not need for the first persons to have funds on that wallet, which is clearly explained in the white paper.
For the most part, data providers are not willing to deal in crypto and get paid in crypto, and that also means that they're not really willing to in any large extent handle crypto, which would be required if they had to pay for the gas fees of the Oracle node. So what the Airnode does is basically creates a wallet for each requester, and the requester funds that wallet, which then is used to pay the gas fees for requesting the data from the API. So the API provider doesn't have to handle any crypto. They don't have to know anything about smart contracts. It's basically designed for scaling towards data providers who don't really necessarily know anything about how Ethereum works or what an Oracle even is.
Is a token ultimately needed?
Yeah, I mean, it's needed. It's basically a governance token in its core. So essentially, for taking part in API3 DAO governance, you need to stake API3 tokens into this insurance collateral pool, which then acts as this quantifiable measure of security for the data feeds. So if basically a data feed goes down, then whatever losses the data consumer incurs due to that malfunction, they will be compensated from the insurance pool. And because all DAO members need to stake into the insurance pool, what that does, it creates direct skin in the game for all DAO participants to make sure that the data feeds are managed and governed in the most secure possible way. So that's how the token essentially works. And then once you stake the token into the insurance pool, you earn staking rewards that basically scale with the demand for the data feeds.
Yeah, to add to that, so Burak actually recently released a really good article on Medium that kind of explains our tokenomics. But one thing I really like about it, in essence, is that there's sort of these two forces. It's one thing to say skin in the game, but there's different ways that can actually be engineered. Whereas we have it so that if you are a staker and you're taking part in the DAO governance, you are both taking on the risks and the rewards. So if poor decisions are made and data feeds malfunction, that is paid out from the staked tokens, but also the profits of the system. So are also made by stakers. So basically, like I said, you're taking on the risks and the rewards. So it creates these two forces, these two skin in the game forces that really incentivize good governance.
So how is API3 funded?
So initially we like Sasha mentioned, and I think I mentioned initially, then that we come from this background from the ChainLink ecosystem, where we worked under a company named called CLC Group, which got funded by a pre-seed funding round from SOSV and Emergo through their D-Lab accelerator. And then we basically used those funds to build API3 for the past 11 months now. So essentially that's the initial funding that we got. Now we recently closed a seed round with some notable investors led by Placeholder. So that got us to $3 million in funding. And now we're doing a public distribution to basically distribute the token to the public, and also raise some more funding for the DAO, which will then be distributed to basically build all the monoliths, is what we call them. So basically parts of the API3 project, like the DAO and the data feeds and the insurance function and so on. So that's the current state of funding.
Are there any plans to be listed on exchanges soon?
Yeah, this is something that we can't really discuss too much. So we'll do the mesa distribution for the public distribution of the API3 token, and then from there on out, obviously, I would say, we find it beneficial to have substantial trading volume for the token so that it can achieve a fair market price. But we can't really discuss actual exchange listings or specifics to really any extent.
What will be the AP3 marketing plan?
Yeah, so essentially the go-to-market plan sort of relies on finding the demand for the APIs, so that and the APIs, so the decentralized data feeds. So essentially going to decentralized application developers and platforms that find the APIs useful, find out about their needs, and then essentially go to the data providers who offer that sort of data and ask them to run Airnodes. So essentially it's sort of this demand first approach. And then once you have demand for a certain data type, what we learned with our work with API providers through the Honeycomb marketplace, which was this API marketplace that we built with CLC Group, was that basically API providers for the most part are happy to meet existing demand. And so, for the most part, they'd be happy to run something simple like an Airnode to provide their data for an existing or a use case that's being developed. So yeah, it's a lot of conversations with different projects, developers, different platforms about doing these integrations and then extending that towards the data providers who provide the type of data that is needed for those use cases.
What will be the biggest challenge for AP3?
So Sasha, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so maybe Heikki has a different answer, but I asked Burak this beforehand because I imagine we'll have different responses. But what he said was definitely scaling. So the way we currently envision it is that new data feeds are created through proposals. But if you've observed other DAOs, you can see that this can be a rather slow process. So I think in the beginning it'll probably be fine, but later on we're trying to onboard multiple data feeds. How do we scale that? Will we continue doing that through proposals, or will we will we assign teams to this task? So basically scaling, I'd say.
Yeah, I would agree. There are a lot of these novel challenges that come with scaling an offering through this DAO governed structure. So it's something that hasn't been done as much as the sort of the centralized alternative, but it also has some unique sort of benefits when it comes to having teams that work on individual tasks and individual integrations, and those teams can then extend beyond Ethereum, for example. So you could have, if a platform wants to do an integration of API3, you could have that team actually exist outside of Ethereum on this platform that's looking to integrate API3, and then they take on the responsibility of working in the context of that platform, maintaining the integration, and that's something that the DAO is like uniquely suited for, because all of these teams don't actually need to be on Ethereum. But yeah, there's a lot of there are a lot of things that need to sort of be explored in this way, and it is sort of an exploratory process in many ways as well. So I think the main challenge in that exploratory process is making it very scalable towards different integrators and platforms and applications, and just making the DAO stretch to meet all the demand that exists.
Yeah, to highlight what Heikki said about this being an exploratory process, like no one yet has come up with a framework for how a DAO should operate most efficiently or optimally. So this is like a new frontier for anyone that's part of a DAO. Things like scaling while maintaining fairness and all these things. But I think it makes it very exciting.
What measures are being taken to guarantee the bulletproof and safety of the Pioneer code being developed by you guys?
So in terms of Oracle security, there's arguably two main components. So there is the implementation of the protocol has to be secure. So that really comes down to good code and auditing. And most blockchain projects stop there. But the thing is, because we're bridging off-chain and on-chain worlds, there's also this question, or this big component of having network security and being battle tested against different kinds of network issues. So, right. So in terms of the first part, the actual security of the code, that mostly comes down to auditing. Although maybe Heikki can talk about other plans.
Yeah. So I would say that third-party audits are the main way of making sure that there are no major bugs in the code, but also there's this sort of gradual approach where you want to go out with some sort of alpha version of the Airnode, for example, initially, and then do a lot of sort of battle testing for that alpha version already, which then leads to a more robust structure that then you audit for the production version. So I think we're looking at an approach like that. I think Burak will be able to would be able to go into more depth, but yeah, to provide a short answer in a nutshell, I suppose, third-party audits would be the short answer.
Cool. I'm very happy to have hosted this session, Heikki, on Point Blank. Thanks for coming on. Can you tell us where we can find you and your project?
Yeah, our website is at API3.org. You can find us on Twitter at API3DAO. There's a Telegram group, and I think that'll get you started. You can read our white paper on the website, so you can download it from the menu.
Also, we have been, since the white paper is pretty long, I think it's almost like 50 pages, we've been writing a series of blog posts where we sort of, in like 5-minute blog posts, we discuss main components of our solution. So sometimes a 50-page white paper might seem a lot for someone to read. So I'd also suggest people to take a look at our Medium page.
Yeah, absolutely. The blog is phenomenal. Sasha and Burak have been updating it quite a bit, so definitely would check that out as well.
Thanks for listening. Until next time, peace.
This episode was brought to you by PrimeXBT, the exchange where you can trade without KYC on legacy markets with your Bitcoin. You can trade commodities like gold, silver, oil, even indexes and forex. Join now and get a 50% bonus on top of your deposit for trading at u.primexbt.com/Panama.